Good day, everybody, and welcome to Hult Prize India. Today, we're going to talk about a very key and important part of social entrepreneurship, which is taking something from ideation to execution. We all have a mission, vision, statements, and our dreams and our goals and our objectives. This is something I talked about in my last presentation when I talked about goal setting and motivation. Now I want to talk about the next step, which is taking it on a practical level from the idea or the dream to actually executing it and what steps we need to take to reach the goal. So let's revisit some of the basics. We need to sustain what is called a program mindset. And I will explain what we mean by a program mindset. We need to set objectives and we need to ensure that we execute flawlessly. So let's get to some basic definitions. A program is the largest division of an overall goal, which social entrepreneurship is aiming towards. And you can look at it sometimes as the entire enterprise is a program of activities moving towards an aim. So it's a set of related measures with a particular long-term aim. That's all it is. And a program can be further subdivided into a number of projects. A project is something you probably are very familiar with. It's a sequence of tasks. Some of the tasks executed in series, some in parallel, to achieve a specific outcome. And then projects have specific tasks. Every project is nothing but a series, a set of tasks put together. And a task is a parcel of work, which is an activity in itself to complete an objective. So once we have that out of the way, let's get down to some structure. So this is what it looks like. You have your overall program, which is divided into projects, and each project has a number of tasks. This schematic shows the tasks executed one after the other, but they could be really in sequence. They could be parallel tasks. They could be partly in parallel, partly in series. There's a number of ways you could organize a program or a project. The important thing is to achieve the whole, we have to break it down into parts and tackle it part by part. So a concrete program of action has to have a goal in mind. And then you have to break the program into discrete projects, and the projects have to be broken down further into manageable tasks. Remember, that is called the work breakdown structure. And the better you have the work breakdown, the better will be your ultimate execution. So how do we tackle the objectives using projects, programs, and tasks? With this framework, you have to first look at your long-term objectives. So we talked about mission, vision statements in one of the other presentations, and I would urge you to go and revisit that if you haven't seen it. Your original mission and vision is your overall program. You could probably split up a mission, vision statement into 3 or 4 programs, or maybe a couple of programs, and say my overall social enterprise is really to achieve 2 principal programs. Just to give you an example, you could say I want to create a way for people to get on the internet who don't have access. Number 1. Your second program could be I want to find a way by which I can provide power to provide an internet access to people. Okay, which is 2 separate technical problems to be solved, and that feeds into your overall vision of your startup, which is to enable internet access to people who don't have internet. This is just an example. Your startup could be having any sort of objective, but it's very easy to break it up into 1 or 2 or 3 key programs of work which you need to achieve and you need to work towards. Once you have your long-term objectives in place, you need to set up what are the mid-term or medium-term objectives to get there. Here, it's very important that you set timelines. The timelines that you set determine the success or failure of your projects. A lot of projects fail because they overrun the time. Set realistic timelines. So if your project is going to take 3 months to complete, don't say it's going to be done in 1.5 months. It doesn't happen. It'll probably take 3.5 or 4 months. Believe me. So be very realistic in your time frames, and then put your projects together. So if one task has to finish before another has to start, these are called dependencies. So for example, if you have to build a house, you have to first build the foundation before you can build the walls. And then you have to build the walls before you can build the roof. You just can't shortcut that. So then you have to first say build foundation 1 month, build walls 1 month, build roof 1 month. It's very clearly 3 tasks in sequence. But if you have to build the walls, you can build all the 4 walls together. So you can say build east wall, build west wall, build north wall, build south wall, and you can build them all in parallel. So that particular set of projects can be done in parallel. Some can be done in parallel, some has to be done in sequence. But if you look at the overall project plan, where you put all the projects together, some in sequence, some in parallel, it's useful to put it down in a diagram. And then look at what are the shortest to something that can be calculated. Those of you who are engineering students would probably have heard of critical path method, PERT, CPM, and such techniques. So I would urge you to go and read up on this. There's a lot of material on the internet and books available. The critical path is a very important concept which you need to understand. I'll introduce you to one more tool which some of you may be familiar with. It's called the Gantt chart or the Gantt template. So it looks something like this. On the x-axis, you have your tasks which have to be completed. You list out specifically the tasks, the projects, in whatever sort of subdivisions you find convenient. And sorry, that's on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, you list out your time frames, which could be in weeks, days, months. It's usually weeks. So you say this particular task will take 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks. And a simple one could be done in Excel, where you just have colored bars running through. You could color code it. So a completed task would have a different color. A task which is in progress could have a different color. Or you could color code it according to the programs that they are assigned to. There's a lot of flexibility there. Then, once you have your plan in place, you need to make sure you execute flawlessly. And when I say flawlessly, I say a lot of things can go wrong. So execution is the most difficult part. And you may have the best strategy, but if you don't execute, it's useless. So you need to stay on track. You need to focus. You need to get everybody involved working on the project and the plan and the tasks at hand. And there's some tips I can give you. It's not exhaustive, but these are just lessons learned along the way. One is just have a sense of urgency. It's good for everybody in the team to say, we have to get it done. The time is short. We have to have a sense of urgency about things. Make sure everybody is available. Check beforehand. We're having a meeting. Is everybody available at this time? Try not to have absentees. If people are not there, can they log in remotely? Can they be on a conference call? Try to make sure everybody's there so you can have good status meetings, good planning, good coordination. Remember, a very important way to achieve a goal is to divide up the work and responsibility. If you assign one team member to do one thing, in an overall startup, for example, you could say one person would be in charge of marketing, or one person could be in charge of finding the customer specifications, or specifically looking at your target audience requirements. One person could be looking at building the product or looking at technical specifications. One person could be looking at more of the commercials or the funding, or getting the resources in place. And one person could look at project management. And this is very important. Always assign one team member who will drive things. Need not be the leader of the overall project, but one person who will make sure everybody comes to meetings, keeps the plan updated, keeps track of who's working on which task, and keeps reminding people: are you up to date? Are you meeting your targets? Are we behind schedule, ahead of schedule? I would urge you to look within your teams and see what fits best for you. In the corporate world, we have a lot of meetings. We're always making decisions, and sometimes meetings just go, into a lot of time waste and waste of resources as well. And that's because they're not planned well. And we need to know how we can have a meeting that is effective. One way of having a meeting is to co-locate it, get everybody in the same room, which is the best. But if you can't, then have a virtual meeting. Have people on Skype, on GoToMeeting, any meeting, any number of tools to do it. Have a teleconference, put everybody on a conference call. Various ways to do it, but do make sure that everybody who's involved in the decision-making process is part of the meeting. Try to appoint a chairman or a coordinator to circulate the agenda. The agenda is important, so everybody knows what's the objective of the meeting. What are we going to discuss? So they come prepared. If you have some materials that you want people to read, circulate it beforehand. Send them emails. Let everybody read up. Let everybody be prepared. So you don't waste time in the meeting explaining things. The meeting is a time to take decisions, not to share information. Information should be shared beforehand. Always respect diversity. People will have different opinions. People will argue. People will come with things that others don't like. That's all right. Meetings are about looking at diverse opinions, reaching a consensus. Everybody has to have their own views, and the views have to reach a consensus. I will talk in another presentation more about consensus building and how we can achieve decisions by consensus. The meeting should end with action items and a plan for the next meeting. Always. So you should always know when you're meeting next and what's the plan. And the plan should have a detail of what task is assigned, what is the deliverable that particular task owner has, who is the owner, specifically who is actually responsible for delivering on the task, and what is the timeline in which they have to deliver. So unless you set a timeline, I can't repeat this enough, unless there's a timeline on what has to be done, nothing really gets done, believe me. And you need to make sure that if something is given as an action item, it's done in the time frame that you plan for it. So it requires a lot of coordination, requires a lot of follow-up, especially if you have a team of a number of members. You have to really get your act together. It does take a little bit of time to get everybody pulling together in the same direction. But finally, execution is an art more than a science. And team execution even more so, especially when you have a startup and things are so disorganized, I would say. You don't have a formal structure. Here are some tips which I've given in this presentation. And I wish you good luck.